everybody, and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Devourer of Worlds himself, the Haslab Marvel Legends Galactus. Probably the biggest Marvel Legends that shall ever be produced, even bigger than the Sentinel that we took a look at earlier on last year, and definitely the biggest review that I've done this year so far, and surprisingly, it's not a Transformer. So, with all that being said, let's kickstart things off by going over the accessories, the tier unlocks, and of course, the Heralds of Galactus themselves, and who better to start off with other than Silver Surfer. So here we have the Silver Surfer. I think out of all of the figures in this pack, this is probably my least favourite, just because I believe it is a reuse of a previous Marvel Legends, and you can definitely see that in regards to the pins. I mean, considering this is a Haslab product and this was one of the tier unlocks, I do wish they maybe could have gone all out and given us a brand new body, but as you guys can see, painted immaculately. I mean, the entire figure head to toe has been fully spray painted in this amazing metallic silver. We do get a very nicely done looking head sculpt. I think that looks awesome, although I'm not a huge fan of this huge port that we just have here at the back. I mean, maybe if Silver Surfer wants to go surfing, he can swing this here on the back, but no, I mean, the surfboard itself can't actually tab into this, and I just think this looks really ugly, especially for a Haslab. So again, why they couldn't have given us some brand new pieces for a tier unlock is a little lazier in my opinion, but overall, very nicely painted. I definitely would be cautious, however, of the hip joints. Considering that I've tried to get this guy in many of those classic poses, I have actually found myself scuffing the insides of these hip joints up, so definitely just be aware of that. But overall, very nicely done. I won't bore you guys with articulation, as I'm almost certain you know exactly what to expect with this body type, but what we will go over are the accessories that come specifically for this guy. So of course, it's Silver Surfer. We do get the surfboard, very nicely painted again and detailed. I do like how this looks. We have got a port which does peg into the base of the surfer's foot, but one of my favourite accessories that we will see with a few other characters as well would be this energy effect. Now this thing is fantastic, amazing for display. I mean, it's been completely cast out of this really nice purple transparent plastic, and as you guys can see, we actually do get some swooping details to give you the impression that he's zooming across the galaxy, and the surfboard itself does very nicely slide through this. Now I'm not too sure whether or not over time this connection could actually begin to rub the silver paint off, as you really do have to kind of squeeze it through these pieces, but as for now I haven't found any issues. But this does just slide over the top. There is a hinge joint here as well as a rotation joint, although the rotation joint feels incredibly brittle. I mean, I actually think I'm twisting the plastic more than I am actually rotating the joint, so definitely just be cautious of that. But really cool, and I do believe this can somewhat actually grasp in Galactus's hand, although I've had no real luck with that, but I'll touch base with that later on. We also do get an energy effect here for Silver Surfer. It has been cast out of a very pliable plastic, but nice sculpt work. I believe yet again we've seen this before, although it doesn't really grip all that well over the forearm, so that's a shame. And there are two pairs of interchangeable hands, so we do get these kind of karate chop surfboarding hands, and then some more expressive, I imagine, energy beaming effect hands, which definitely do help for some of the more dynamic poses. So with all that being said, let's get Silver Surfer out of the way and take a look at Frankie Raye, aka Nova, and this is a really nicely done figure. Unlike Silver Surfer, I think this is either a brand new mold for this set or just a newer release in general, as it doesn't have any of the pins. It is a complete pinless body, and this is a female body which actually has double jointed elbows, which is fantastic. Now one thing which is definitely brand new would have to be the head sculpt. I mean, this thing looks fantastic, especially the hairpiece. You'll see more of kind of this fire effect when we take a look at her display base in just a second, but very nicely sculpted. We do actually get a kind of two-tone orange used here, so very dark in the middle, and then kind of these outer sections are much lighter. I think it looks fantastic. The face sculpt too, as well as the paintwork, as you would expect for a Haslab, does look immaculate, although I will say when I got this out of the box, the joints were incredibly stiff, and I'm just going by my own personal experience with Transformers. Clear plastic never really holds up over time, so I would definitely recommend to perhaps preheat the joints with a hairdryer or maybe some boiling water just to loosen them up a little bit, as you certainly don't want any cracks. But as you guys can see, very nicely designed. I do believe it's painted. I mean, it may be a mixture of paint and transparent plastic, but the overall effect definitely does look cool, and I'm going to be honest and say it's looking a little better on camera than how it does in person. There is a lot of swirly plastic, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I guess it's something that we've become accustomed to with Marvel Legends figures. So in all, yeah, definitely a really cool figure. I will very quickly just cover her articulation. Like I said, I do believe she is kind of a brand new mold. So there is a hinge joint here at the neck, a ball joint as well, which is really cool. You can't actually get much range of motion going backwards due to the hairpiece. I mean, it is very stiff. We do get some shoulder joints, which can hinge forwards and backwards, out to the sides, rotation here at the bicep, double jointed elbows on a female figure, which is fantastic. So I am glad that they went all out in that regards. We do get a full rotation here at the hand, hinge joint forwards and backwards, a ball joint at the upper diaphragm, although it is very restricted, but I guess you can get it rotating left to right, which is decent. The hips can kick forwards that far, back to that far before her bunda does slightly restrict it. We do get a kick out to the side, rotation at the thigh, as well as double jointed knees, which is fantastic. And finally, the foot can pivot forwards and backwards and rotate left to right. Now, much like the Surfer, she too does include a display base, something which I think is so cool. I hope they can actually begin to include these with some of the more standalone releases. The sculpt on this is fantastic, and for those of you who are a fan of my Transformers reviews, you can be sure to see this a lot more over on the channel, as I love fire effects. I mean, the paintwork on this is fantastic. It is actually very, very thick and durable plastic too. I wasn't expecting it to be nowhere near as solid as it actually is, although again, much like the Surfer display base, it is specifically designed to slide into Galactus's hand, although I haven't had much luck with that, which I'll showcase in just a second. Now, to actually get her in this, you're basically just going to want to straighten out this foot, and it does slide through this hole. Now, in theory, there is actually a peg, although I'm going to be honest and say I have had no luck at all in securing that peg into the sole of the foot. It does just not want to rest in there, and I think it's because the actual peg itself is very shallow. Now, the grip that actually holds the leg into place is more than adequate enough, but it does get a little bit annoying, I'm not going to lie. So you are supposed to just slide that in there, and as you guys can see, it does just continuously want to push out of that socket, but it will hold in there very nicely, and I'm going to be honest and say it looks fantastic. Now, a few other accessories that she comes with are 2 pairs of interchangeable hands. So we do get a pair of fisted hands, which I thought were pretty cool, and then a pair of gripping hands, which, to be honest, I'm not too sure why they included them, as she doesn't actually come with any handheld accessories. So definitely a really cool figure. Let's move on to the final figure, that being Morg, and this guy's great. I think out of all of the tier unlocks, at least as far as the figures go, this is by far my favourite, and I mean, I think it's the one that many of you guys are going to be the most excited for too. So as we just take a look here at the details, he's got this really gruesome skin texture, which just looks fantastic. I mean, this thing looks insane. I think the head sculpt looks really nicely done, especially the teeth detailing. I mean, that is such a sinister smirk, and as we come around to the back, you can see we have a hairpiece, which is in fact separate from the head sculpt, which is cool. And as we just take a look here at the arms, I love the musculature detail, much like Nova, a complete pinless body, which again makes Silver Surfer look even more lazy than he already did. But we do get some very nice arm guards, albeit cast out of a fairly pliable piece of plastic. I do like how this chest piece looks. Overall, very nicely done, and a really great addition to the collection. Now, I will go over the articulation for him, just as I'm sure there'll be some wondering as to how he can maneuver. Due to the hair being actually fairly stiff, we merely are only able to look left to right. I mean, you can get a slight pivot up and down, but it's not the greatest. We do get a slight rock side to side. No butterfly joints, although we do get some soft ratchets which can rotate all the way around. Hinge joint out to the side, rotation there at the bicep. Double jointed pinless elbows, which just look fantastic. And I was quite curious to see how the torso would rotate, considering that we do have this belt piece, but completely unhindered. That is so nicely done. So it can rotate the full 360. It can also crunch forwards to an okay amount. I mean, to be honest, not much, but it can definitely crunch backwards and rock side to side. The hips can kick forwards that far, back to, I would say, about that far, hinge out to the side, rotation there at the thigh, double jointed pinless knees, which are awesome. And then finally, the foot can pivot forwards and backwards and rock side to side. Now, accessory wise here for Morg, I'm going to be honest and say he is a little more lackluster. I mean, he doesn't come with any kind of display base or no interchangeable hands. I was really hoping that we could have perhaps got a pair of fisted hands, but nevertheless, the only accessory we do get included is the axe, and this has been decently sculpted. No paint on the actual axe itself. This is just kind of that shimmery plastic that they like to use, although we do get some nice black here for the handle, and it can be inserted into any of the hands. So let's just snap it in here to this one. one thing which I did think was quite cool is that on this hand, the hinge joint does move in and out, whereas for this one, it goes up and down, which is really cool, especially for actually having him hold the axe. So definitely a really cool figure, and I think just these Heralds of Galactus in general are some really sweet figures. I do just wish, however, that the Silver Surfer could have been a complete brand new body, and that here with Morg we could have got some interchangeable hands at the very least. And now we take a look at what I want to say was one of the final tier unlocks, that being the Doctor Doom head. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is something that I don't think any of us particularly asked for, and after this review it will more than likely never see the light of day in my collection again. But with all that being said, it does look so much better in hand than how it did in some of the product shots, and the painting and the sculpting on it is fantastic. I mean, as you guys can see, the helmet has got a whole host of nuts and bolts. The metallic steel look that they've been able to replicate with the paint does look really cool, and I love the eye detail. This is something that you'll also see more of with the actual Galactus head, which is fantastic. And the texture here for the hood looks very realistic. I really do like this kind of lip that we have at the back, so definitely really cool, but it is completely hollow. I mean, there's no LEDs. When you actually peg this onto the body, there'll be no LEDs either. And talking of additional head accessories, we also do get included 2 interchangeable mouthpieces. Now, the sculpt work on these look fantastic. I mean, this one in particular really does throw me back to the old Toy Biz days where they used to do actual proper sculptures. I mean, this looks fantastic. The definition to the nose and the teeth and just everything about this I think looks awesome. And here is one which I want to say is kind of giving me the impression that we're dealing with a defeated Galactus, one of which is starving and slowly dying. But again, very nicely painted as well as sculpted, and we may as well give you guys a tease. Here we have the Galactus head sculpt. So I'm just going to showcase how you can actually swap a few of these pieces out. So this is the face piece which you'll get when you actually take this out of the box. As you guys can see, it's very neutral in terms of design, but still very nicely painted. So you'll pop the head clean off of the neck joint, very easy to do, and then you'll actually come here to the inside and push your finger through, which should then pop the mouthpiece out. Now we can take any of these. Let's just take this one, and it will basically just slide there into that hollow cavity, and it does take a little bit of finesse just to get that fully straightened out, but as you guys can see, looking fantastic. And yes, I did accidentally activate the LEDs, but amazing. I mean, it really does just create an entirely different look for the character. And let's just very quickly showcase how the grinning facial expression looks, which again, my personal favorite, just adds a ton of personality and character to this figure, and I mean, just looking fantastic. So with all that being said, let's actually move on to the big guy himself. And here we have Galactus, and this thing is massive. Now, I'm going to try my absolute best to give you guys a professional review, but I'm constantly battling with lights and microphones, etc., because this thing is just so enormous. So please do excuse me if there are a few slightly wonky camera angles, but here we have the big boy himself, and detail-wise, this thing is nuts. So let's jump straight into it. We do actually get some LED functions with this guy, so 2 batteries in the head, and then I want to say 2 batteries here for the torso. I think they are AAA batteries, so that's something worth bearing in mind. But to activate the ones here in the head, you'll want to come around to the back, smack this button here, and that will cause just the head to illuminate on its own. And as you guys can see, that in itself looks incredible. I mean, we do get a very slight pulsating light here in the center of the crest. The antlers do actually illuminate, as so do the eyes. It just looks terrific. And in regards to articulation, we do get a minimal amount looking up and down. It really is just the left to right that you're going to be able to get out of this piece, but in all, awesome. Now we're going to turn here to the LEDs of the chest, which too has been detailed and painted very nicely. If we smack this big section here in the center, it will cause both the chest and the head to illuminate simultaneously, which I thought was really cool. And as you guys can see, that is really impressive. Now, I was incredibly impressed by the Sentinel, but I have to say that the lights that this guy's got going for him just look so much better, and they're certainly a lot more vibrant. And even as we come around here to the back, as you guys can see, this section too does illuminate, and I'll try and give you a close-up of this. Very nicely painted as well as sculpted. So in all, LED wise, this guy looks fantastic. Now, let's turn to some of the articulation points and general detail here for the upper torso. So, as you guys can see, amazingly sculpted for the chest. I mean, this whole region looks awesome. It is actually comprised out of two different pieces. So, we get the purple underneath and the really heavy duty armor over the top. Honestly, I was expecting this to be made out of a kind of PVC material, similar to what we would expect from the Sentinel where the shoulders were. But no, it is solid hard plastic, which does slightly limit the range of motion that you can get going forwards and backwards. So to talk about that, we basically do get a hinge joint which can hinge roughly to 90, although as you guys can see, you will have to utilize that shoulder joint to get it kind of going off to the side, as it will bump into this. Now, despite that being on a friction joint, very heavy duty, which is awesome, we do, however, get proper reinforced ratchet joints out of the shoulders, which are just fantastic. And I am actually applying quite a lot of weight to that, and they're not drooping, not collapsing at all, so that's awesome. In addition to this, we also do get a ratcheted bicep, which is so cool. I mean, I wouldn't expect them to pack a ratchet in that, but they have. And as you guys can see, I mean, just scattered throughout the arms, the gauntlet detail looks amazing. The paint and the sculpt work just all over this guy is nuts. But in terms of the elbows, despite there being a double joint, really and truly, you're only going to get roughly 90 degrees out of that. So just to showcase, as you guys can see, I am utilizing both of them, and that is pretty much a 90-degree range of motion, which, I mean, it's okay for Galactus. He's not going to be pulling off any dabbing poses, etc. But then we turn to the hands, which have got to be by far the most articulated piece about this figure in general. So not only do we get a swivel going left to right, but all of the fingers are individually articulated. I think there's something crazy like 20 points in each hand. I mean, that is just fantastic. You're going to be able to get this guy into some world-crushing poses, him gripping onto your Fantastic Four, etc. Loads of hinge joints in the fingers themselves. We actually do get a ratchet joint, which can go forwards and backwards. And again, the detail for the inside and the back of the hand just looks nuts. And now we turn to the torso articulation. Now, he is actually pretty poseable. There is kind of a ball joint here in this upper section, as you would expect from Marvel Legends, and an actual ab crunch, although I'm going to be honest and say it's super tight, and I do not want to risk breaking this guy at all, so I'll try and push it as far as I can go. But basically, ball joint, which does allow you to tilt him side to side, which is pretty cool. That also does allow him to rotate slightly left to right. These pieces are made out of a slightly more PVC material, so it does allow for a bit of flex, and you can also crunch him forwards and backwards just on that ball joint alone. Although if I try and get the ab crunch working, there we go, that's one click. That is roughly what you're dealing with. And for a figure of this scale, I mean, I think that's fantastic. If you want him looking down upon the Fantastic Four, that's going to look really awesome. And then in terms of it going backwards, I don't think it does, and again, I really don't want to force it, so, I mean, it's decent, definitely for the size of this guy. And then finally, we come down here to the lower section of the legs, basically the hips, and like the rest of the figure, sculpted immaculately. The skirt piece looks fantastic, the paint all looks great, and the texture that we've actually got on the thighs and the boots is really cool, but this is really articulated, and the knees were an area where I wanted to see whether or not they were similar to the Sentinel, and I can safely say absolutely not. They are super reinforced, so going forwards, we basically do just get a hinge joint, not ratcheted, and as you guys can see, it can kick out roughly to that far. Again, I don't want to force it, as I just don't want to break this figure, but we do also get a ratchet joint, which can kick out to the sides, very tight, but as you guys can see, it will kick out. We also do get proper heavy-duty ratchet joints in the knees. I mean, these things are so durable, so let's just crunch them as far back as I can get it. Again, much like the elbows, there is a double joint here, but you merely do just get roughly 90. You could probably push it a little past that, but I don't want to force it, and they are super tight. So definitely no knee issues on this guy whatsoever. If anything, they're a little too tight. We do surprisingly actually get a boot rotation. So this can rotate left to right, painted and sculpted amazingly. The foot guard can hinge up to allow the foot to pivot forwards, backwards, as well as rock side to side, which for a figure of this scale is amazing, and that ankle rocker is way better when in comparison to what we got with the Sentinel. And then as we take a very quick look at the back detail and paintwork, I'm actually going to have to pick this guy up like a small toddler. This is equally as detailed as the front, so as you guys can see, various different strands and straps. I think that will look so cool. Lots of armor plating here for the back, which looks fantastic. And as we just take a look here at the butt skirt, I think that looks cool. Sadly, I do actually have a splodge of glue on this, which is really unfortunate, especially for a Haslab. And I mean, the QC should have been tightened up on this guy. That is a big, big shame, but
coming down here to the back of the legs, again, very nicely sculpted and painted for the most part. Now, as I mentioned previously in the video, you can actually take the display bases that both Nova and the Silver Surfer come with and kind of attach them onto the hand, although I'm not too sure whether or not I'm doing something wrong, but at least here on my copy, it really doesn't like to stay in there all that well at all. I mean, it will grip over, but as you can see, definitely fighting me, and it does require a lot of force for it to just kind of gently grasp. So I would definitely recommend to wrap those fingers around to further secure that, but even then it's not a solid connection, and I personally wouldn't recommend leaving this guy on a shelf with both Nova and the Silver Surfer attached, as not only do you not want the figures to fall off, but you don't want it to cause Galactus to topple over and of course take a big nasty shelf dive. And so, wrapping up on this review for the Marvel Legends Haslab GALACTUS, in all, it's a remarkable piece, as it really should be for the price tag. Now, we're going to talk tiers first of all. I think all of the figures for the most part are really nicely done, especially Nova and Morg. I'm not too big of a fan of the Silver Surfer just because it does reuse a past body mold, I want to say, and considering those other two figures are pinless and the Silver Surfer is plated with pins, to me, he does just look slightly out of place and kind of feels a little lazy when in comparison to what else we got offered. But it's still a really nice inclusion. I mean, you can't have Galactus without having the Silver Surfer, and there are enough differences here between, I want to say, the Walgreens exclusive to make this figure feel worthy of being included with a Haslab. I love the display base for both Nova and for the Surfer. Those are great. The Nova figure is awesome, as so is the Morg, although I do wish he could have come with additional hands. I mean, he doesn't come with any fisted hands, which is a shame. The alternate Doctor Doom head sculpt, I mean, much like when it was revealed, I have no purpose for it at all. It is just unfortunate that they decided to use that as a tier unlock, as I think they could have maybe packed in something a little better. But it's a nice addition, I guess, for collectors who want an alternate look for Galactus, and I love the interchangeable mouthpieces that this guy comes with. And talking of Galactus himself, I mean, he's incredibly impressive. He's larger than the Sentinel, which already set the bar for being one of the biggest Marvel Legends of all time, and I'd say he's better. I mean, the sculpting and the painting on this guy is just remarkable. The LED function really brings him to life on a shelf, and the articulation, despite him being so massive, is really cool. I mean, he can withstand pretty much any pose. Those ratchet joints are super tight, unlike the Sentinel, maybe too tight in some aspects, but if you backed this, you're going to be so impressed with it. I have no doubt about that at all. I mean, I'm just an avid Marvel Legends collector, and even I am taken back by just how astonishing this figure has turned out. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to let me know what you guys thought of the review. I did try and film it as best I possibly could. It is one of the largest figures that I've ever reviewed here over on the channel, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.